already used to seeing beautiful cities around the world, like the amazing city of Melbourne, Australia, and of course the cool and stunning city of Shanghai, China. But did you know that there are also beautiful cities underground? Yes, you heard that right. These are cities built by ancient people in the ancient world. It's amazing because they were built with such detail and skill that you wouldn't believe ancient people made them. And in this video, that's what we're going to find out. Here you'll see how beautiful the underground cities are. But before we start, don't forget to like this video. It means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much, and now let's get started. First on our list is Orvieto Underground. At first glance, you'll see what looks like a normal city above ground in Italy. Old churches, narrow streets, and houses made of stone. But beneath one of the oldest cities there's a hidden world that most people don't even know about. It's an entire city buried underground. It's not just a simple cave or a hiding place. It's a vast underground network built and used by people for more than 2,000 years. While other ancient civilizations were expanding their cities upwards, the people of Orvieto, Italy, did the opposite. They dug down into the very rock of the mountain and turned it into their homes, storage areas, factories, passageways, and sometimes even their lifeline during times of war. According to Italian archaeologists and the Orvieto Underground Project, they have discovered more than 1,200 tunnels and underground chambers beneath the city. And as studies go deeper using modern laser scanning and mapping technology, it turns out that this system is even more complex than experts previously thought. But why? The reason this became possible is because of the unique type of stone found in the area. Orvieto stands on top of volcanic tuff, a type of rock formed from ash and debris from ancient volcanic eruptions. According to geological studies in central Italy, it's relatively soft while being dug, but it hardens when exposed to air. It's like a natural construction material that gets stronger over time. And this is where the engineering of ancient people became unique. As space on the surface of the city became limited, they didn't immediately move to another place. Instead, they used the underground as an extension of their entire community, gradually forming a hidden city with its own system of storage, water, ventilation, and escape routes. But survival wasn't the only reason they did this. In fact, the underground city also played a big role in their economy. One of the most important industries in Orvieto back then was olive oil production. At a time when there were no refrigerators or modern cooling systems, food and oil would spoil quickly, which was a big problem. But underground, the temperature is naturally cool and stable all year round. Because of this, they turned many parts of the tunnels into underground processing areas. They also discovered giant stone grinders and carb settling tanks that were directly carved into the rock. According to historians, animals were even brought down here to turn the olive crushers while the surroundings were still cool. And as a result, the olive oil would last longer before spoiling and production became more efficient. Not only that, there were also special rooms for raising pigeons. At first glance, it may seem unusual, but it was very important back then. Because farmland on top of the mountain was limited, they needed to have an alternative food source that didn't require a lot of space. So they built underground pigeon chambers with hundreds of small holes in the walls. This is where the birds laid their eggs and lived. There are also small openings leading out to the cliffside, so the pigeons can go in and out while staying protected from predators. In other words, it's like they had their own underground food system. But one of the most important reasons why this underground city became so advanced is water. Long before the Romans arrived, the Etruscans were already known as the first ancient civilization to settle in the area. With their water engineering, they built narrow drainage tunnels called cuniculi to control groundwater and rain. According to historians, this was very important because too much water could cause the ground beneath the city to collapse. That's why the entire underground network had a careful slope and channels to safely carry water away from the structures. Even today, modern Orvieto still uses some of those ancient drainage systems. But there came a time when the threat to the city became more serious. In the 16th century, after Rome was invaded in the year 1527, Pope Clement VII became afraid that Orvieto might also be surrounded. So he commissioned one of the coolest engineering projects under the city, St. Patrick's Well. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary well. But when you go down inside, you'll see that it's actually a very deep masterpiece of engineering. It's over 60 meters deep and has two separate spiral ramps that go around, one going down and one going up. What's unique is that the two paths never meet. This was designed so that the flow of animals and people getting water would be continuous. One path goes down, one path goes up. There are no collisions, even though it's dark and narrow. According to architectural historians, this is one of the finest examples of Renaissance engineering in Italy. And because there are dozens of windows that open toward the center of the shaft, natural light can still enter even deep underground. But as the underground network expanded, it also became more important for the city's defense. There are secret passages that connect directly to houses and basements above. Some even reach all the way to the valley floor below the mountain. When there is an invasion or siege, the residents can disappear without being immediately noticed by the enemy. There are also some tunnels that are so narrow and winding that a single person can defend them against a much larger group of invaders. And here you can see how practical the ancient engineers were. They weren't just thinking about how to survive in the present. They were thinking about how the entire city could survive even during times of famine, war, or total collapse above ground. Even their waste disposal system was very advanced for their time. There were underground pits that were used as garbage dumps during the medieval era. But because these were sealed for many centuries, they have become a treasure trove for archaeologists today. Inside the old pits, researchers found preserved ceramics, tools, food, and various items used by people back then. Because of this, experts have gained a better understanding of how the residents of Orvieto lived from the medieval period to the Renaissance era. According to studies, it turns out that even though the underground city seemed isolated, they were still connected to the larger Mediterranean trade network at that time. And the entire underground complex became even more mysterious when modern LIDAR and laser scanning technology were used in recent years. Researchers discovered that in some parts of the city, the tunnels were separated by only a very thin layer. Sometimes the rock was just a few centimeters thick. This means that the builders back then knew where they were and where the other groups were digging, even without modern radar or computers. Even more surprising, there were sections that were intentionally made thin so they could be easily broken in case of an emergency. It's like saying this was an ancient version of modular city planning. And this is where the true story of Orvieto becomes clearer. It's not just a random collection of caves, it's a carefully planned underground civilization. While other cities back then relied on high walls for protection, the people here used the underground itself as their defense, storage system, lifeline, and backup civilization. Above ground, there are plazas, churches, and ordinary life. But beneath their feet, there is another city that has been quietly operating for centuries. And even today, much of it is still not fully understood by the modern world. Now let's move on to Naours underground tunnels. If in Orvieto the underground was used for business, food, and clever urban planning, the story is different in northern France. Here in the quiet village of Naours, the underground city wasn't built for people to get rich. It was built so they wouldn't die. On the surface, you'll just see ordinary countryside, houses, fields, trees, and peaceful roads. But underneath it, there's a hidden world that's like an emergency version of the whole town. According to the official site for Naours underground tunnels, the underground city contained 28 galleries and almost 300 rooms. In this picture, it is said that it could hide thousands of people from invading armies. And the most impressive thing about this is that it was not built by kings or emperors. It was built by ordinary people, farmers, families, people who were tired of the endless wars above ground. During the Middle Ages, up to the 17th century, the region of Picardy was often in the path of conflict. There were soldiers, raiders, and invading armies passing through the villages. When they arrived, houses could be burned, food taken, or entire families put in danger. So the people of Naours came up with an extreme plan. When it became dangerous above ground, the entire village would disappear underground. There were rooms for families, places for animals, storage for food, and chapels for prayer. There were communal spaces where people could gather while waiting to see if it was safe to return above ground. This wasn't just a hiding place for one night. This was an underground shelter that could support life for a longer period. Because the rocks in the area were limestone and chalk, they were easier to dig compared to harder rocks. But there were also risks. If the excavation was done incorrectly, the ceiling could collapse. That's why you'll notice that many parts inside have rounded ceilings. It's not just for looks. This is to handle the pressure from the soil above. The weight is distributed more evenly, making the room safer. It looks simple, but the reasoning behind it is deeper than it seems. It's like they weren't just digging. They studied the behavior of the rock. And since many people could possibly hide here, they also needed air. They couldn't just close everything off because they'd run out of oxygen, especially if there was fire, food, and animals inside. That's why they made ventilation shafts. These are holes connected to the surface so air can come in and smoke can go out. But they had to make sure these weren't obvious. Because if the enemy saw smoke coming out of the ground, they'd know where people were hiding. So the air and smoke passages were carefully hidden. Some of them came out in places that weren't easy to notice, like in the woods or near existing structures on the surface. In simple terms, the entire underground city was designed to breathe without being detected. Imagine the scene. On the surface, a soldier passes by. The village is quiet. It's as if there are no people, no children, no animals, no lights. But underground, the whole community is there. They're cooking, praying, taking care of animals, and waiting for the danger to pass. It's like a town that was temporarily swallowed by the earth. There are also storage pits for grain and food. This is very important because during an invasion, the enemy's first target is the food supply. If the harvest is taken or burned, the whole village goes hungry. But if you have food hidden underground, you have a chance to survive even if everything above is destroyed. Here you can see how practical the underground city of Naours is. This isn't fantasy, it's a survival system. It's not just lives that are saved here, but also culture, family, animals, food, and faith. But there's another chapter of Naours that's more recent and more emotional. During the First World War, soldiers near the Western Front also used the tunnels. According to researchers, thousands of graffiti were found on the walls of the underground city. Many of these were left by British and Australian soldiers. There are names, hometowns, military units, simple drawings and messages. There are traces of people who didn't know if they would ever make it home. According to France-Toulon.fr and archaeological studies about the site, around 3,000 pieces of graffiti have been recorded in Naours, and many of these are connected to soldiers who passed through during the Great War. And this is where the place starts to feel heavier, because the same tunnels that once served as a hiding place for medieval villagers against invading armies also became a resting place for modern soldiers before they returned to the front line. Different times, different wars, but the same fear, the search for a safe place when the world above becomes dangerous. Some researchers were even able to trace some of the names in the graffiti and link them to records of soldiers and their families. Suddenly, the carvings on the stone are no longer just markings. They become voices. These are the last traces of ordinary people who passed underground while carrying the weight of war. And maybe that's the reason why Naours is unique. It's not as grand as a palace. It doesn't shine with wealth. There are no monuments. There's no gold, marble, or giant statues. But it has something stronger than decoration. And this is the real strategy for survival. In Naours, we see that sometimes the smartest city isn't the one with the tallest tower, but the one that can hide the whole town underground until the danger above has passed. And now let's talk about Derinkuyu and the Cappadocia network. In the middle of the dry plains of central Turkey, there is an ordinary house that became the starting point of one of the most important archaeological discoveries in modern history. In 1963, according to Turkish historical records and studies about the Cappadocia region, there was a man who was renovating his basement when he noticed something unusual on the wall. When he tore it down, he discovered not just a storage room, but a passageway behind it. It turned out to be connected to a vast underground city that had long been lost to history. This is Derinkuyu, one of the deepest and largest underground cities ever discovered in the world. At first glance, it's hard to believe its scale. The city descends about 85 meters underground and has many interconnected levels. According to the Turkish Ministry of Culture and UNESCO documentation about Cappadocia, thousands of people could stay here along with food, water, and animals for a long period of time. And here, the place becomes even more astonishing. Because this is not just a simple hiding place, it is a whole city that can function independently of the surface world. The reason why this is possible is because, once again, nature used volcanic rock. The region of Cappadocia is full of volcanic tuff, which is soft when being dug, but becomes sturdy when it dries and is exposed to air. For many centuries, different civilizations gradually expanded underground. Some historical accounts suggest the very first excavation began during the time of the Phrygians. Meanwhile, according to other studies, a major expansion happened during the Byzantine era, especially during the time of the Arab-Byzantine conflicts. This means that it wasn't just one civilization that built it. It's like the project was passed down through different generations. In every era, something new was added. New tunnels, new rooms, new defenses, and the deeper you go into the city, the more there are. You can feel that this wasn't made just for short-term hiding. In the upper levels, you can see areas for livestock. There are carved stalls, feeding troughs, and space for animals. Their setup is practical. When the animals are near the entrance, it's easier to control their smell and movement. Aside from that, the body heat of the animals also helps warm up the upper levels. In a simple way, they use natural heat as a survival advantage. As you go deeper into the lower parts of the city, that's where you'll find the center of daily life. There are communal kitchens, wine production areas, oil presses, and storage rooms for grain and food. According to archaeologists, it's clear that the purpose of Derinkuyu was not just to survive, but to maintain a normal way of life, even when there was chaos above. Even underground, eating, working, studying, and practicing faith continued. A large religious chamber was also discovered, which was used during the Byzantine era. Its design is similar to a church above ground, but it was carved directly into the rock. It's as if they wanted to bring their entire civilization down beneath the earth. But the most famous part of Derinkuyu is its defense system. In different parts of the tunnels, there are giant circular stone doors that look like huge stone wheels. Some of them weigh hundreds of kilos. When there is danger, these can be rolled to close off the passage. And what's more impressive, they can only be opened from the inside. Even if an enemy manages to enter a tunnel, they will still face narrow corridors, dead ends, and a series of giant stone barriers. It's like a giant underground maze, designed to wear down anyone who tries to attack. But the biggest problem in an underground city isn't defense, it's air and water. How can you rest underground if you don't have fresh air? How can thousands of people survive if the water runs out? This is where modern engineers are even more impressed with Derinkuyu. In the middle of the city, there's a very deep ventilation shaft that serves as the main lungs of the entire underground complex. From here, the airflow spreads to different parts of the city using smaller channels. And even now, according to visitors and researchers, the airflow is still good in some of the deepest parts of the city. This means that the ancient ventilation design still works even after more than 1,000 years. Their water system is even more ingenious. The city has a central well, but it's not just a simple open shaft. Access to water is controlled at different levels so that people on the surface can't easily reach or poison it. This is very important when the city is under siege. As long as there is air, water, and food, the residents can stay underground for a long time. And this is where one of the most mysterious parts of the story comes in. Some researchers compare the underground cities of Cappadocia to ancient texts from the Zoroastrian tradition, particularly the story about Yima and the Vara, an underground refuge that was said to be built to save people, animals, and plants from a severe winter catastrophe. There is no direct evidence that Derinkuyu is really connected to this, and many historians consider it as just a mythological story. But according to some scholars, the similarities in concept are notable: a self-contained underground shelter designed for long-term survival. And the more Derinkuyu is studied, the more questions arise. For example, where did the millions of tons of rock excavated from underground go? Because if you think about it, this was a massive excavation, but there are hardly any giant debris fields around the city. Some researchers have a theory that the excavated rock may have been gradually spread over farmland or used in other construction projects so that the true scale of the underground network wouldn't be noticed. And if that's true, it means the people who did this were extremely organized. This wasn't a project done by just a few individuals. This was a long-term coordinated operation that may have lasted for many generations. What's even more surprising is the possibility that Derinkuyu is actually connected to other underground cities in Cappadocia. According to some archaeological surveys and ground-penetrating radar studies, there is evidence that there may be long tunnels connecting the different underground complexes in the region. There are even reports about possible tunnels stretching several kilometers to nearby underground cities like Kamakli. But up to now, researchers are still studying this, and the full extent of the network has not yet been completely confirmed. If this is proven, it means Cappadocia is not just a single underground city. It could possibly be an entire hidden underground province, a region that can disappear from the surface of the world when war comes, while the invaders are looking at the empty plains above. The real population might actually be beneath their feet, and that could be the reason why, even now, Derinkuyu is still so hard to fully understand. Because this is not just an engineering project. It's evidence of how far people can go when the surface of the world is not safe to live on. In the silence of its narrow stairways and dark tunnels, you can see the traces of a civilization willing to leave the sunlight behind just to survive beneath the rock. Now let's go to the salt cathedral of Zipaquira. If the underground cities of Turkey were built for hiding and survival, what you'll see in the mountains of Colombia is something different. Here, it's not just a simple city that was dug underground, but a massive church literally carved inside a mountain of salt. More than 200 meters underground in the town of Zipaquira, near Bogota, you'll find one of the most unique religious structures in the world, the Salt Cathedral of Zipaquira. And what's even more impressive is that it wasn't built using ordinary hollow blocks or cement. The mountain itself was turned into a church. When you first go down inside, it doesn't immediately occur to you that you're in a mine. It feels more like you're in another world. It's dark, quiet, and the air is cold. And in every tunnel, you'll see giant salt walls with unique colors, ash, and crystal-like textures. It's as if you're inside a living giant rock. But before this place became a tourist attraction and religious site, it was first the center of one of the most important industries in ancient Colombia. Long before the Spanish conquistadors arrived, the Muisca civilization had already been mining salt in the region. According to historical records about the Muisca people, salt was very important back then because it was used not only for food but also for trade. In fact, it was even called white gold because a large part of the wealth of the Muisca Confederation came from the salt trade. While other civilizations were fighting for gold, the Muisca became wealthy because of salt. And as mining in the mountains went deeper, the tunnels underground gradually increased as well. When the Spaniards arrived in the 16th century, the operations were expanded even more. They turned the mountain into a large industrial mining complex because they saw how valuable the salt deposits in the area were. But the most important change happened at the start of the 20th century. While the miners were working underground in very dangerous conditions, they started making small salt sculptures. They made these on the walls of the mine to pray before starting work. At first it was simple. A small cross, a little prayer area, a place to ask for protection before going down into the dark and dangerous tunnels. But as time went on, the idea grew bigger and bigger. By the 1950s, the plan to build a whole underground cathedral inside Salt Mountain began. And this is where one of the most complicated engineering projects in South America began, because it's difficult to build a giant structure inside a mountain of salt. Salt rock behaves differently compared to ordinary stone. According to engineering studies about halite formations, salt is very strong when compressed. But over time, it also has a tendency to move and change shape because of the pressure from the mountain above. This means that even if the surroundings look solid, the mountain is slowly moving, almost like it's alive. That's why every chamber and hallway in the cathedral needs to be designed to withstand geological pressure for a long period of time. You'll notice that many of the ceilings inside are high and curved. That's not just for aesthetics. They were made that way to evenly distribute the weight of the mountain around the tunnels. In simple terms, they didn't fight against the pressure of the mountain. They used it to support the entire structure. And that's probably the reason why most of the cathedral remains stable even after decades have passed. Inside the complex, there's a series of tunnels that resemble a pilgrimage route. As you walk, you'll pass through 14 chapels representing the Stations of the Cross. Each one has its own design. There are giant crosses, there are carved reliefs, there is dramatic lighting that hits the salt walls, making the place look more cinematic. And as you go deeper into the cathedral, you'll feel its unique silence even more. The acoustics inside the salt chambers are also different. Unlike ordinary caves where the echo is loud, the salt walls absorb sound. That's why the atmosphere inside feels heavy and quiet. It's like the mountain is swallowing every sound. Even the air inside feels different. According to studies about the mine's microclimate, the salt walls naturally absorb moisture, making the underground environment drier and more stable. Because of this, the air feels different compared to the surface. But even though the cathedral looks permanently sturdy, there's still one big problem that engineers continue to monitor: the mountain itself. Because as time passes, the salt deposits continue to move. The pressure is gradually squeezing the excavated spaces inside the mine. In other words, the mountain is gradually trying to reclaim the spaces that people have excavated. That's why engineers regularly check the structural condition of the cathedral to make sure the chambers and tunnels are still safe. And this is where Zipaquira becomes even more unique, because this isn't an abandoned underground structure. The mountain is still alive and mining is still ongoing. While thousands of tourists and pilgrims visit the cathedral in the upper levels, industrial salt extraction continues in the deeper parts of the mountain. This means that religion, tourism, engineering, and mining all coexist within a single mountain. And according to modern mapping projects using LIDAR and ground-penetrating radar, the public has only seen a small part of the entire underground network. There are still giant hidden chambers underground left behind by long-term mining. Some of these are said to be so large that entire modern buildings could fit inside. Researchers also discovered older tunnels that were painstakingly dug by the Muisca civilization before the arrival of modern explosives. These are narrower, more irregular, and follow the natural saltwater veins inside the mountain more closely. It's like you can see the evolution of mining itself from ancient times all the way to the modern industrial era. On every level of the mountain, there are traces of different generations: indigenous miners, Spanish operators, modern engineers, workers who turned a place that was once just a simple mine into a church. And maybe that's the most important lesson of Zipaquira, that sometimes people don't just dig into mountains to extract wealth. Sometimes we dig into it to create a place that can give hope, peace, and faith even beneath the heavy world above. Now let's go to the Mosques of Mangistau. In the western part of Kazakhstan, there's a region that looks like another planet. There are no tall trees, no colorful cities, only pure white cliffs, dry plains, and vast deserts that seem endless. This is Mangistau, and beneath this quiet land, there's a hidden world that wasn't made for war, mining, or storing food. It was made for faith. While other underground structures in the world were built to protect people from enemies, the underground mosques of Mangistau were built for quiet, meditation, and spiritual journeys. During the Silk Road era, this region was an important route for merchants, travelers, and caravans traveling between Asia and the Middle East. But traveling here was not easy. There was intense heat during the day, extreme cold at night, and the safe places were very far apart. So as people passed through the desert, some chose to stay here for the rest of their lives. Sufi mystics, spiritual teachers, and dervishes who believe that it's easier to hear the silence of faith when you are far from the noise of the world. According to studies about Silk Road religious sites in Kazakhstan, some of the most famous spiritual figures in the region are Chopin Atta and Shakpak Atta, figures who became central to the local spiritual tradition in Mangistau. But instead of building an ordinary mosque above ground, they dug into the mountain itself. They directly carved the limestone cliffs to create underground prayer halls and sacred chambers inside the rock. And this is where the architecture of Mangistau starts to become unique. Because this is not just a simple cave mosque. Some parts of it look like a combination of a natural cave and an engineered structure. There are pillars, arched ceilings, carved prayer niches, and interconnected chambers that seem to have been gradually expanded over many centuries. One of the most important sites here is the Shakpak Atta Mosque. According to historians and archaeologists in Kazakhstan, its design is unique compared to most Islamic underground structures. Its floor plan has a cross-shaped layout, which has given rise to many theories among researchers. Some historians believe that it may have been influenced by older traditions before Islam continued to spread throughout the region. This includes former belief systems in Central Asia, but this hasn't been fully confirmed yet, so experts discuss it carefully. What is clear is this. Mangistau has long been a meeting point for different cultures, religions, and travelers. And the stone itself became the record of everyone who passed through here. But one of the most amazing parts of the underground mosques is their use of light. At first glance, the inside of the mosque just looks like a dark cave. But when the sun is in the right position, rays of light fall directly on certain prayer areas inside. This is not an accident. There are vertical shafts carefully carved upwards into the mountain to serve as natural light channels. And according to some studies about the shafts in the Shakpak Atta complex, there is a possibility that some of them are aligned based on the movement of the sun during certain times of the year. It's like a giant stone calendar underground. When the sun hits at the right angle, certain parts of the mosque suddenly light up while the rest of the surroundings remain dark. And for the Sufi mystics back then, light was a big part of spiritual symbolism. It's like the mountain itself becomes an instrument of time and faith. But it's not just prayer halls that you can find around the underground mosques. Outside some entrances, there are vast necropolises or ancient burial grounds. Thousands of stone graves and markers are scattered around the desert. According to local studies in the Mangistau region, it was important for many people in the past to be buried near the sacred underground sanctuaries. Because of this, it became a place not only for the living, but also for the dead. While the underground cities of Turkey were built to hide the population from enemies, the purpose of the Mangistau mosques was different. Here the underground was made into a place for reflection, prayer, and connection with the afterlife. And even though these places are beautiful, maintaining them was not easy. Because limestone is the main rock here, it is easily affected by erosion, rain, and the strong desert winds. That's why the builders back then made drainage channels and protective overhangs above the entrances to keep water away from the carvings inside. Inside, they smoothed some of the walls to better reflect natural light and prevent the stone from deteriorating quickly. Their techniques may look simple, but that's exactly why many of these mosques are still standing after so many centuries. And as modern archaeologists study Mangistau more closely, using 3D scanning and digital preservation technology, it turns out that some of the caves in the region are even older than previously thought. There are petroglyphs and markings that may date back to the Bronze Age, according to some archaeological findings in Kazakhstan. This means that even before these places became Islamic sanctuaries, the mountains and caves of Mangistau already held special significance for ancient people. It's as if every civilization that passed through the region left its mark on the stone. And as time went by, the entire desert became a giant spiritual archive. During the day, Mangistau is quiet and seems lifeless. But beneath its white cliffs, mosques are hidden that once served as guides for travelers. But beneath its white cliffs, mosques are hidden that once served as guides for travelers, a resting place for mystics and a home of tranquility in the middle of the vast desert. And perhaps that's what makes it truly unique. Because while other civilizations built grand monuments for the whole world to see, the people here chose to hide their faith inside the very mountains themselves.